Let's go.
Shall we go?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. The ACME Academy. I got it wrong already.
It's going to be a long night in paradise.
Oh, God, it's going to be a long night. Believe me. You have no idea. The ACME Writing Academy is on the air, beaming to you from ACME Broadcast Headquarters in Venice Beach, California. This is your host, Rick Krizman, along with Jim Frank, Marcello, Vazquez, Mike Magnuson, and Bob Clark, welcoming you, the listener, to today's walkabout through the annals of literature, where today we are concerning ourselves with nothing less than the great books of the Western world. What are they? Why are they considered great? And how might you, as a writer, ascend to these hallowed ranks? Okay, my wife did this. She went to 8 lists of great books, and they were Lifehack, Guardian, Modern Library, Harvard Bookstore, Marie Claire, Reader's Digest, Le Monde, and The Telegraph. And they each listed their top 10 great books. And there was some correlation. Any guess as to which made the most lists?
Are they by title?
By title, yeah. Specific books.
James Joyce?
James Joyce, the book?
Ulysses.
I think Ulysses did not make any list.
Oh, really?
Nope. She did a
top 10 greatest books of all time.
Right. She did a spreadsheet.
It's got to be War and Peace then.
The top book that made 6 out of 8 lists was The Great Gatsby.
Oh man, that book fucking sucks.
And it was listed first.
No, it doesn't.
First, second,
Jesus
fourth,
Christ.
fifth, and fifth.
You know,
Everything
you
that's wrong with
can
American
shit on a
literature.
lot of books, but
Okay.
you cannot shit on a great.
No, it's
Gatsby.
a great book.
Oh no, I'll shit out all fucking day long. You want? Let's start. Let's go.
Despite the
So it's tag team against those two.
the great Gotzel.
despite the appeal.
Is Hemingway in there?
Yes, he is, but he's not on my.
Whom the bell tolls?
He's not on the top of the top. The
For Whom the Bell Tolls,
second place was a tie with 4 each between Jane Eyre and To Kill a Mockingbird.
Whoa. I'd never include either one.
Then 2 books were on 3 lists, and that was Lord of the Rings and Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah, Pride and Prejudice should be up there, I think.
And then there were 6.
There's the sublime and the ridiculous. Lord of the Rings.
Right, exactly, right? And Pride and Prejudice. Right. And there were 6 books that made 2 lists. They were Wuthering Heights, Anna Karenina, 1984, Grapes of Wrath, Catch-22, and Proust, In Search of Lost Time. Anyhow, I present this only to say that maybe we should assume that there is some meat on this bone and that it's a meaningful question to ask ourselves. What makes a book great? What's the criteria for greatness? How does it come about? I mean, does an author just sit at his desk on a fine Monday morning, sharpen his quill, and sit down to write his masterwork of literature? Is that how it happens? Is it intentional?
Is it intentional? I think that none of those writers intended to write anything less than a work of art. And I think that's probably the one thing that they want to do. But I think it's also true, as has been mentioned, that it's entertainment plays a huge role. No one wants to write a great book that no one's going to read because it bores the shit out of them. I mean, it's just that simple. So,
has anybody told Thomas Pynchon?
Yeah, yeah. I think, well, you know, that one I think is a lot of question of taste. You know, like David Foster Wallace. You know,
I love him.
I do too, but I know plenty of people who don't like what he writes. You know, when we think about the list that you mentioned, I was going to talk about Pride and Prejudice this evening because I also think, you know, that meets the question of durability. I mean, that's a book that I think just about everyone reads at one point in their life if they have to read literature in college or high school. So, and I know that the reactions to that are going to vary quite a bit, but I happened to pick it up the other day again after a long time, and I started reading it. And, you know, it captured my attention for 20 pages before I had to put it down in grade papers.
You mentioned this business of writing a work of art?
Yeah, it's got to be new. I mean, if we're, Ezra Pound's edict about making it new, I think, it's what modernists struggled with at the beginning of the 19th century when they're trying to come up with new ways of expressing themselves as they see things like the novel begin to take full shape and the short story as well. So there are a lot of people doing new things and trying to do things in a different way. And I think that's sort of an aesthetic awareness that a lot of writers have. But, there's some great things that have been written in, I think we would probably call relatively conventional forms, where writers aren't trying to do anything especially new. Sometimes they're just taking on a new subject, or like in To Kill a Mockingbird, that we haven't seen before. Mm-hmm. So that probably is a new way of looking at things as well, isn't it?
I think it's interesting you should mention that book, because I don't think Harper Lee sat down to write a great masterpiece of Western literature. I think if you read the previous book to that wasn't published, I think she was just trying to buy herself some good sentences and tell a story. And that she had greatness thrust upon her,
Well, maybe, but I also think she knew that she was writing about something new, in the sense that she was writing a book that challenged a lot of opinions in the South about how justice is meted out for people who are African Americans and how whites react to that. So I think that was new. I think for her, it wasn't so much the form that was new, but I think it was the subject matter that was new.
There you go. No, so subject matter and theme.
Yeah.
Right, Bob?
I was wondering about that. Let me quote Melville. He said, to produce a mighty book, you must choose a mighty theme. And it seemed like all great books of what's considered great literature, they all have a very expansive theme and story to tell.
So are we talking about what are great books, or what's the writer's intention when they're going to write books?
I'm trying to figure out what, I'd like to know, what is it about these stories and these books that makes them what they are? What are they doing that someone else isn't doing? There's a difference. There's a reason why these books all share one thing in common for sure. 100 years later, they're still in print.
Right.
I guess, but we got to address the elephant.
I've been curious as to what makes them stand out, and why are they held up, at least in the Western canon, of this is high literature. See what I'm saying?
Wow, that's a can of worms right there. This is the literature which we are going to deem great. And then I guess the question you're asking, right? What makes great literature great?
What makes great literature great? And I'd like to know who gets to decide.
So the question is
that
who makes
coming out of universities?
Right. I think it's interesting, Rick, that you looked at publishing houses came up with these lists. And I think publishing editors, et cetera, the business or the mode of production, that literature is something that's produced, should be something interesting to writers themselves, though. I mean, I don't think the common reader really gives a shit about that. But as writers, I was always fascinated by what was the beginning of the mode of production of the novel. What was the proto-novel before it became something that was produced, marketed, sold? And then even further than that, if we go to who decides what great literature is, I think I mentioned this in a thread, it also becomes a part of the national identity. Look how much Moby Dick and Melville, no pun intended, right, is the novel we all go to when it's the great novel, American novel. It's like something that everyone agrees. It's become part of our identity as literati or people of literature.
Yeah.
Not to say that they're not great stories. I mean, I'm not saying that.
Well, maybe even less so. Like, as a matter of fact, I would say with Moby Dick, that's more, people say Moby Dick is the greatest American novel, just it's almost like a tongue-in-cheek thing at this point. Mm-hmm. What you really find is The Great Gatsby. Okay, now you want to talk about this in terms of publishing houses. Why do you want to have The Great Gatsby be the number one book of all time? Because they sell it to every fucking high school in the United States.
You got that right.
That's a lot of units, brother. That's
it's on every
really
single
is.
book.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah, and like in Moby Dick, man, you're not going to move that many units to the freshman class at Woodrow Wilson High School,
Right.
Not anymore.
Look at Catcher in the Rye.
Yeah.
Was when that was marketed, sold. When I remember I had to read in high school. And I think it's an interesting question, this idea of how it gets sold or produced, or who says who says that something is great.
Yeah,
I do.
But do
And you do. We all do.
I like that.
Right?
I think we're going to get to that.
So it's the subject matter that seems to be, that stands out with great literature. True?
Not always.
Well, it depends, Like I think, according to the literature is mighty. You can see how some people would hear that, and in a way take great offense. Like could there be a more masculine image than that?
Yeah.
Like literature is going to be a mighty theme, and come over and it's going to kick your ass.
Right.
Oh
okay?
yeah.
Is there any more masculine image than a sperm whale?
To get back to our points about writing, I can't really think of what anybody would typify, in most cases, a great novel that isn't also great writing. And I think, if we're going to be talking about writing, and maybe, as you pointed out, Mike, or as you've been wont to say in the past, a lot of people go to what they consider to be great writing because they see things in it that they want to work on in their own writing.
Well, I think let's think about reading first. I mean, we did our appropriate moment. You got to shit on publishers because that's always fun,
Of course.
But it's not arbitrary. They don't just pick random books and say, we're going to make this the book for everybody. No, there's something behind it, There's a real thing.
But I mean, the thing is we determine that what we like in great love, like just say we're not thinking of the world as writers. Say you're a young philosophy major at a university or something like that, or just a high school kid with a curious mind. You latch onto a book that touches you in some way that thinks sort of how you think. We always talk about you read a book and you encounter a new way of looking at the world. And I don't know. I think like somehow the book touches you, and we all individually enjoy some books over others just for those reasons. I think that's true of something like 50 Shades of Grey too. Speaking of touching, but this reaches out and touches an audience. And a lot of people say it was great. It's a great book. Shit. They saw that there was an entire town in Maine that got rich, pulping the trees to make the books, I guess,
When I was a kid, the Hardy Boys, every Saturday I would mow the lawn and I'd get paid $2. And then I'd walk up to the local bookstore and buy the newest Hardy Boys hardback, go home, sit in a chair, motionless until that book was read. And I thought it was the greatest book ever. And all of my friends agreed, right? I can't tell you how crushed I was later in life when I found out that there was no Franklin W. Dixon. But still, my experience was valid, and it's one of the things that led me into the love of reading. To your point, Mike, about the enthusiasm you feel for a book.
Oh man, you just know when it happened. You remember like the first kind of book that you read, when your mom wasn't reading it to you at night or something like that.
Yep.
And there you were in 6th grade, down in the basement reading this book that you got from the library.
Lolita.
Yeah,
no, it was Candy.
I remember
Candy.
I can't remember the name. Candy.
Remember Candy?
Fear of Flying.
Yes. Oh God.
All right,
See,
everybody's hands where you can see them.
Okay.
I think I have to say about enthusiasm, and I've been thinking about this question ever since it came up. Why I continue to go and reject the great works that I was told that I had read because they were great works. And I spent a lot of time thinking about that stuff, and that's not, something that really inspires me to read. But my new obsession, my new reading list, as an Argentinian or blah blah, if you hear they tell you, you're not a Latino if you're actually in a Latino country, right? Over here they tell you you're Latino. And I started reading the great works of literature of Argentina, of Brazil, of Chile, and that's what I've been very enthusiastic of lately. You know, I started off with Roberto Bolaño about 5 years ago with 2666. Before then, it was Manuel Piu, the great Argentine writer, The Kisses of Spider Woman.
Yeah, it's a good book.
Ernesto Sabato, the Tunnel, which is basically a copy of Notes from the Underground from Dostoevsky. Those books began to shape me and I don't know, maybe there's something what Mike said, right? Finally, I found something that was connecting to me.
Right.
Something that was connecting to me. And because I'm a writer. And then one of the problems I was having as a writer, beginning as a writer, I was imitating American writers, or there was nothing to do with the so-called identity that I'm supposed to be writing about. And the irony of it all is now I'm going back to reading William Faulkner, because then I found out most of the Latino writers read Faulkner.
But that gets to the point that I think shapes a lot of us, at least as readers. A lot of what we select to read is based on conversations we have with our friends and our peers and people whose judgment we respect. I mean, I have a neighbor who tells me all the time that the Tecumseh 5-horse engine is the best damn lawnmower engine ever made, but his lawnmower never runs, and he can't even fix it. And you know, is
that the kind of engine you have on your boat?
It did run. Remember when he went flying by the house at like 30 miles an hour?
It went away. It ran away from the dock.
That was a boat? I thought it was a canoe.
You know what? I'm going to catch a big fucking fish in that, and you guys are all going to be impressed.
Yeah, but when you pull it in, by the time you get back, it's going to be eaten by sharks.
It's going to pull me to shore, actually.
But Tim, you make an excellent point there.
I think when it comes to books, our tastes are largely shaped to a larger degree than I would probably admit by the people I know and the suggestions that they make. But I also, you know, if you read certain authors, they mention books in their novels that they think are tremendous, and then I sometimes go seek those books out too. There's certain people whose judgment we trust, and maybe that's in part what's shaped the canon, such as it may be at this point.
I think that's what kind of subverts the canon. I mean,
to a certain extent, yeah.
The punk years when you're 17 years old in the 80s, and you're listening to the Doors and read awful poetry by Jim Morrison. You're the American Knife fit on me like a purple glove. Yeah. And the best part of the biography is like there's a chapter or an index, all the books that he read. So I made a list and I started going down everything, like Arthur Rimbaud, Proust, Baudelaire. And then after that, Baudelaire, and who gives a shit about Jim Morrison today?
What? You know what? I mean, I know, like we're talking about what great book. I mean, this seems like in a certain way, it's a worn subject. It's worn because, we have to admire books, and everybody tells you you're never going to be a writer unless you read a lot and so forth. But, when we were thinking about talking about this, I couldn't get off my mind that what's happened to me, and I'm assuming this is true of all of us, it's not like we haven't been doing this shit for a million years, I mean, God, I've been serious about being a writer for 35 years now. I mean, I've read some books, and I was an English major. I went to graduate school in English, I mean, I know what a good book is, I guess, according to that framework that you learn there. But then something else happens to you. You go through a life now, like in my case, and, Jim's and Marcello, and became English teachers.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Writing teachers. And I remember about the late 90s, when I had just, it takes a long time to get through the process of, getting books coming out and shit. And it's a tough thing, And to me, all of a sudden I was marking up papers. So I got to a point in my life where I didn't want to read a word written by anyone. I don't care how good they were for the rest of my life. No, I mean, I
hear you.
There's a happy ending to this story, and not the kind that you think it is. So
hands in the air.
Here we go.
So I have started reading again. And it was Bolaño for me, too. Part of it was my association with Marcello. Actually, before that, he showed me some crazy texts of Subcomandante Marcos.
Oh, yeah.
Which were
Don Dorito.
Don Dorito. Yeah. So these are actual subversive texts, revolutionary texts written in Chiapas from the Zapatistas, where their spokesman is a cockroach named Don Dorito, basically. He comes and yells at Soup Comandante Marcos, and then Don Dorito's cockroach is riding around on a turtle holding a paper clip, and he's going to march on Mexico City.
The turtle's name is Pegasus.
This was the craziest shit I ever saw, and I thought, man, that's just not allowed.
Right, and here's a leader of a revolutionary faction, right, resulting after the NAFTA and all that, and the uprising Chiapas, who happened to be the Subcomandante Marcos, was a communications and philosophy professor at UNAM University. So he puts on a ski mask and he reads the manual of, I guess, the American Army Manual of Survival or whatever. Right. And he goes and he teaches a bunch of local indigenous people who 90% don't speak Spanish how to fight. And they start an uprising. And in the jungle, he starts writing these crazy fucked up communiques and smuggles them out through journalists who would come and see him, and they would publish them on the EZLN Zapatista.org.
No, I was at a point when I encountered this. I'm serious. I wasn't going to read ever again. I'd rather watch the goddamn tractor pull on TV, or paint drying would be better than reading anything.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And this crazy ass shit. All of a sudden, I thought, man, there's something wonderful there. Maybe just because that would not be allowed in the American workshop environment in which I was teaching and in which I was raised. Could you imagine a talking cockroach? Try running that through your workshop next time.
Paper clip as a sword or a weapon. No, I get the enthusiasm part. When I started reading that,
so you see this stuff. It's crazy. It's fun. It's like it's totally different. And then I read, Bolaño's 2666. And I've been a hardcore reader ever since.
Savage Detectives. Yeah.
I think again, one of the things you're pointing out about the leader of the Chiapas uprising is that he's posing things in an entirely new and different way. He's not just your run-of-the-mill revolutionary who wants to tear everything down. I mean, this guy has a unique and new way of seeing the world in regard to a certain set of events, and I think it's that newness and freshness that we respond to.
I have found, anyways, that I have been drawn to literature not written in America, in particular. I love the South America because it's a different way of spinning a tale.
Mm-hmm.
European literature. There's a guy I teach with at Pacific named Chris Abani, African novelist. Man, that shit is something else.
Is it?
Like, you've never heard anything like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Do you think that when you read these writers from around the world that you recognize something about yourself or the way you think in them and didn't expect to find it there?
Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe that's putting too much of the onus on my own ego as a reader.
Well, I'm just trying to follow up on something that you said earlier, because I do think you're kind of right about that. I mean, someone who's spent a lot of time reading literature in another language, I'm beginning to ask myself if that's the reason why I prefer certain writers as opposed to others, because I see something in the way they think that's familiar to me, even though they're from somewhere else. I think
most feelings and emotions are universal, aren't they?
I think so too.
It doesn't matter where the story's coming from. Some human emotions and things, we're just universal. It's part of being human. Well, we can relate to anything that's well written. Doesn't matter, I don't think, what part of the world it comes from, does it?
I don't know. I think it does. If you start looking at the history of literature and how, like the British in British India, or the French in their colonies, and you look at the Spanish, you can see those literary canons were there was a nationalistic identity attached to them, right?
Yeah.
And in one way or the other one, they were, what's the word? They were not only colonizing these islands, they were colonizing literature. Their literature was being imposed on these people. And then, you would come up and try to get up into that next class system, where be part British, then you get into neocolonialism, and then you start mimicking those masters, like Dickens or Conrad and all that. And then and I don't know, is that universal? I mean, did the British go through that as well?
Yeah, because if you know the writer V.S. Naipaul, who I think
he's from Trinidad Tobago,
he's a colossal jerk to some people, but I mean, he has a book that's called The Mimic Men that is talking precisely about what you're talking about right there. And it's sort of the revenge of the empire. I mean, after long periods of colonization, they returned to the countries that colonized them. And he went to England and really never went back to Trinidad.
Right.
And more or less renounced his West Indian heritage to a large extent. But yet he wrote novels like Bend in the River or The Mimic Men, which demonstrate a new way of thinking about the world, but he's more than comfortable in the familiar confines of a traditional novel. I'm not quite sure what to say about that, other than in that case maybe it's a new voice. Again, I think it's back to newness again.
I think this kind of came up a little in our online discussions about genre, and how there's the guy who starts the genre, but he's not part of it. And I'd made the joke that, Jesus was not a Christian, right?
Right.
Led Zeppelin was not a heavy metal band.
Right.
So these are the greats. And going back again to Moby Dick, and I have to say, I recently read that book after, I'm probably the last person on the planet to read it, expecting a seafaring adventure. And instead, you get this thing it's completely nuts. And it's nuts in a totally exalting way. I mean, it springs off the page. He can be talking about, the bone length, the rib lengths of a sperm whale, and it's delightful. How does he do that? I have no idea. And meanwhile, the whole plot, right? Captain Ahab against the whale. Fucking Ahab dies in one sentence on page 520. That's all you get.
Yeah.
But you've got Moby Dick, and then you've got all the other seafaring adventures, right? But Moby Dick stands out in terms of its just completely nutso singularity. No, anyhow.
Right.
It's page 86 in the Confederacy of Dunces, where they did what do they do with the cat?
Oh God. Yes.
He was whipping his pudding to the image of his dead cat or something.
Oh, it was his dog.
Remember that?
It was his dog. Yeah.
Well, that was
he was
a great
jerking
book.
off in a sock.
Confederacy
he was
of
jerking
Dunces.
off in his sock.
About his cat.
Thinking about his dog. Writing all his shit on one of those big chief fucking tablets.
I was going to say, you guys as writing professors, are you finding that this is where people are maybe holding themselves back and not being willing to take the plunge and to be nuts and to be singularly themselves in order to write a great book? No?
I don't think it's, I don't think it's that. I think that when we're talking about this, we're talking about the Confederacy of Dunces and, laughing because it's a kind of a guy book, sort of, with, farts and burps and masturbation and other fun things like that. That guys like to read about.
Yeah.
Well, okay. But we can't help this shit, right? So you take a class from me, you may not be drawn to that material, thank God. You're more civilized than me and wouldn't be drawn to that. But yet my enthusiasm for it, how much I think this stuff is great, you shouldn't put yourself off from that. And just the opposite. I know other people who teach the completely serious. And if that, I'm trying not even to say that in a pejorative way, but a different kind of writing.
Right.
Than I like. I kind of like it funny. I like kind of grotesquerie and stuff just because I don't know. I can't help it, So the student who takes somebody like me and somebody who teaches the completely opposite thing has to find, is there something of value of this crazy stuff that I like that the writer can take for themselves? You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. That's the problem. You get into boxes. Well, I only like American realist fiction. I will not
No,
read
worse-
stories that don't have 4 scenes in them.
Yeah, you're right. Like even when you find yourself, or I found myself in that type of classroom, when I was a student, right? And I call it the protected reading, where the professor is telling you how to read something. This is the meaning of this particular story.
Oh,
It's the protected reading. God forbid if you go anywhere outside of that, basic pseudo formalistic, new critical, whatever you want to call it, nothing but the text. And that's also, that's a turn off, that idea. And I think that also happens when as far as happening in an MFA program or any type of writing class, right? You have to read something a certain way.
maybe not so much in an MFA, but I remember wanting to be an English major, and I couldn't. I kept dropping the classes because it was just horrible. You're dissecting these things, and the patient dies on the table.
No, I think it goes back to enthusiasm.
Exactly.
It goes back to when I finally took that class, my 3rd year, finally getting through all the bullshit of getting into that 4-year college and getting my 3rd year when I'm actually an English major, and I take Victorian Lit. And that professor, Oliver S. Buckton III,
Yeah.
clicking his pen.
Brit, right?
Oh, yeah, old Brit, clicking his pen nervously, and just fucking a song of enthusiasm when he would talk about, the literature that he was teaching. Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde.
Yep.
He could just make that, or the Wilkie Collins, the Moonstone.
The Moonstone.
And when this guy talked about it, and the way he came around, and all the side things, all the biographical information that he had of their perversion and the Victorian era, creepiness, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, fuck yeah. It's like being in a biography / novel. Enthusiasm.
I had the same experience. I spent 1 year at University of Exeter as an undergrad and taking English and philosophy. And we had a professor, this guy, just whatever your image of Sir Toby Belch is, it's this guy. And we were doing Yeats' The Second Coming. And he is like dragging his overweight body across the stage, intoning, "What rough beast slouches towards Bethlehem." And the hair is standing up on our arms. It's like, oh my God, this is like the fucking greatest shit ever. And to this day, I've memorized that poem, and I just like it applies to everything. And
that's worth every penny of your admission,
It is.
No, but that thing that I was trying to get at, where like you got to have one teacher who does one thing. Like as a developing writer, you have to be open to a bunch of different ways of liking books. And the bigger thing, and I taught in an environment that wasn't really good for quite a while, where I would like teaching stuff, and then people I taught with would tell my students that, well, you shouldn't be reading that stuff. It's shit. But I found, after having lived through that, which was bad, it was bullshit, like that kind of cutting each other down. I found that, like, in order to really get along and liking books and having variable ideas of what's great, man, you teach with other people, they're into something, fine. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Right. They're not trying to hurt their students by liking a different thing than you like. No, the students it's just like they're going through Whole Foods, man. They got all this great stuff, and they just pick what they want. Or then
isn't it how great? An example would be like the Black Mountain Poets, Charles Olson, Robert Creeley. It's such enthusiasm, and apparently, I remember reading this in some biography, that the way they would cross teach different types of genres. So if you were an expert in maybe in forms of poetry, villanelles, sestinas, all that, go and teach a class in physics, or cross teach, like change, or see things from a different perspective and get the full experience of knowledge. But that's all coming from enthusiasm. You can imagine being in that class and saying, fuck, I'm glad I woke up this morning and showed up here.
Right.
And you go home and you start pecking away, or you just start writing shit down or scrawling it wherever you can. That's the energy I think you need to get through this life, if one would say, as a writer or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Enthusiasm. I keep going back to that. I don't know why.
I know. That's, I mean, Mike, I had the same analogous experience to you in the music business, where, after 35 years of doing it, I didn't listen to music anymore. It was partly because my kids grew up and left, because when they were home and I'd drive them to school, I'd let them own the radio. And they'd listen to Kiss FM, Top 40 and your Destiny's Child and Eminem and rap and all this shit that I would never, ever listen to. But I'd listen to it through their ears, and I would feel their enthusiasm, and I would dig the shit out of it. And I still do. I listen to those songs, and it's just marvelous. And this whole business of putting down this book or that book or whatever, you're just missing an opportunity. If you can find a way of seeing the joy of something through somebody else's eyes who's enthusiastic about it, right, then you have given yourself, greater joy and satisfaction in your life. It sounds like I'm getting all, Caleb Gabron here, but just to your point about enthusiasm, I think it's everything. When you have writer's block, it's not that you can't write a sentence. I mean, anybody can sit down and write 2 to 4 pages a day. But if you're not enthused, it's not going to be any good. Nothing's going to jump off the page. And after you've been educated in all this, I think like John McNally told me once after, post MFA, says, you got to take responsibility yourself. You got to find your own enthusiasms about things. Otherwise, it's just going to be like, well, I don't have an advisor to write for anymore, so I guess I won't write anything.
My experience was in the restaurant business when I was after 25 years of cooking. I think for 6 years after that, I didn't want to fucking see another spaghetti meatball.
Yep.
But I also remember those moments we were cooking. My brother's a genius chef. The thing where we would create something one night for a special. Every Friday, Saturday night, we had to make a special. And your traditional buco milanese, right?
Ooh,
which are the Trinity with the the onions but we change it up. We make it that night. We're going to make a Sicilian style.
Yeah.
Onions, sage with deglaze of Marcello wine and a nice veal stock and served with saffron fettuccine. And they come up to us like, this was great tonight, but you can't repeat this all the time. So we need consistency.
Oh.
Like, what the fuck? What consistency? I'm just creating art here. Everybody's happy.
That's right.
Everybody went home with the greatest meal they ever had.
Mm-hmm.
We can't put that on the menu. You can't make that anymore because we can't repeat that.
Right.
And that was just constant until it became a business. You know what I mean? Everything was business. Everything was weighed. Everything was calculated. And yeah, my brother never lost that fire though. He just didn't give a shit. Consistency, fuck you. I'll just reinvent it every time I do it.
Yep.
Because it was great every time he did it. So now I'm back to cooking again. But I'm obsessed with foods I've never had before. I'm learning how to cook Thai food. I've mastered the art of the wok. I got a big burn in my arm to show you. The other day I was seasoning
you know what? I saw that. I was wondering. Look at that.
I was seasoning our wok in a 600-degree oven.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, and I put it on top of the stove and I walked into the wok. And the best part is I hear something. Like, what the fuck is that? I look over and oh. And the enthusiasm was off the charts. I think I was cussing in Mandarin and Cantonese.
Meanwhile, back on the subject at hand.
Actually, but we're getting it. You get to it. What book are you enthusiastic about?
Yeah, so I like Bolaño's 2666. I think this thing has meant a lot to me. And it's a long book. It's really 5 novels, where the first part of the book is about some critics looking into an obscure German novelist, and it goes to another thing, end up in Juarez, a fictionalized Juarez, where these women are dying all over the place. And it is a book that you start on one thing and realize that the one thing you started with wasn't what the book was about until you get to the end and it all flips over on its head again. It's a magnificent thing. It's one of those things you can be like, well, I'm not going to read a 1,200-page novel. Do it.
I'm going to
do it and don't bitch about it. And with a big book like that, you can't know until you get into it. You got to they got to pick it up and then you got to open it up to page 1. And you're going to be sitting there for a while.
Cool.
Lovely book. Greatest book, in my view, in the last 30, 40 years. The dog came in the kitchen and stole the crust of bread. The cook up with the ladle and beat him till he was dead. Then all the dogs came running. Sorry.
This is the time to remind our listeners that you're listening to the ACME Writing Academy, the ACME of Writing Academies, ACME Writing Academy, except no substitute.
Yes. Go, 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 go. Let's go. Yeah, why not? Oh.
Are you dead?
That was the short version. That was the 1 minute version of Waiting for Godot, in case you wanted.
I think I like it. This could be a new Acme feature, 1 minute versions.
It's like charades, kind of.
Right.
I have lots of favorite books, but I think probably the one that's probably been on my mind most in the last couple of years has been Madame Bovary. And, I was reading about this, and I forget what professor it was that was raising this point. Just a second.
We're going to take this moment to remind you that you're listening. He's going to spank his kids.
That book so much, he just had to run outside and beat his head against a tree or something. He needed to get closer to the thing that makes paper,
You guys could hear me?
Yes. Yeah. How's your head?
Yeah. How's your head? How's your head?
How's your head? Nothing.
Never
well, no, don't laugh at my expense and not tell me why.
Oh, you'll find out.
Yeah, you'll find out.
I remember in high school reading a lot of this classic stuff, and it was very, very serious. And now, later in life, post-MFA, I read Nabokov and Melville and stuff. Borges, he's hysterical. I never got the humor. Never got the humor. And now it's like, oh my God, this is like gut-busting. Nabokov. Right. Pale Fire? Good Lord. It's like the ultimate, satire of academia. It's hysterical.
Moby Dick is a funny book.
Oh, extremely funny. I think humor, when you laugh, when a human being laughs biologically, that is an extrusion of enthusiasm, right?
Usually.
You're expressing this eruptive enthusiasm for the moment when you laugh. There's Magnuson trying not to laugh.
You caught me on the word extrusion, actually.
I was wondering if is that even a word?
I was like, man,
Brilliantine.
Did I make that up? Well, I'm glad you're expressing enthusiasm for my word.
Oh, I think that maybe we're not up to discussing great books. Maybe that's the best way to go about it. Earlier we were talking about what's the intention of writing a great book.
What's the intention?
Writing it down in our little online discussion. And I always think that anybody who intends to do something great can kiss my ass. It's not about that.
That's what I think too. I think you got to just sit down and try to buy a sentence.
A lot of it has to do with the theme you pick.
The theme.
Yeah,
this is such a gringo mentality. Everything's got to be great, magnificent, at the top of the list, and all that kind of shit. Or Latin America, right? It's like, ¿qué es el libro más grande de la historia? And they're like, I don't know, my ass. Mi culo. Because everyone has their own taste, But Latin America, the problem that we have there with great books is that they're part of the, there's a book that you have to memorize parts of in Argentina in grade school called Martín Fierro, which is the story of the gauchos, the cowboy story, and it was before the fences went up and they couldn't cross the ranges anymore. The Creole gaucho and all this bullshit. The best part, the guy who wrote it never rode a fucking horse in his life. You're taught that myth as part of your identity, but the kids are Argentina. These kids are all smart ass like the kids today anyway.
I think really what we have to look at, and asking what the great books are and going into this, it's sort of, I hate to, there are no stupid questions, but in a way that might be one of them.
Yep.
It might be like, well, we're asked what is this thing? And there's no way to quantify it across any spectrum of one culture alone. You can't decide what's a great thing, what's not a great thing.
No.
The whole idea of great books and greatness, maybe it's a gringo thing. It's got to be, I don't know. Maybe you just got to love what you're doing. If you love the work you're doing, well, then God go with you. Maybe it'll be great. Maybe that book you read was great. Maybe somebody told you it was a great book and you read it and it was still great. Or maybe somebody was a great book tells you it's a great book and it wasn't. And I think the same is true of writing, though. You know, like, man, you don't have to do one thing or another. You just have to be passionate about it.
There you
keep going after it. And if nobody cares in the end, well, nobody cared in the end, but you still did something worthwhile with your time.
Well done. Well said.
And I think, you know what? I think we ought to just go out on that. I
think so too.
Let's just say goodnight, because
I just want to say one thing. Read. Right. I think just read it. You know, the best thing you can say to anyone, read it all. Read as much as you can. Be something that's going to take you where the next day you're going to pick up. You can get on a typewriter or on your computer, or take out the legal pad, and you're going to start writing. I think that's what it is.
That's
it's
right.
Like taking that breath. It's like just that breath that you're always taking. That's what reading, and that's what books are to me, and stories.
There it is.
All right. Well, let's say goodnight here. This has been ACME Writing Academy with Bob Clark, Mike Magnuson, Marcello Vazquez, Jim Frank. We're out of here. Thank you for joining us. Have a pleasant rest of your day, and happy writing.